Truly wild.
I'm gonna also practice what I'm gonna say for this opener, so I don't fumble it 16 times before we start, like last week.
It's like all weeks.
Well,
I'm so bad at.
he's only had to do it once.
Well, I mean, Allie,
Oh yeah, that I.
Allie is
don't use
Allie's a
your
pro.
It's like instant karma because I gave her shit and now I can't do it.
This meeting is being recorded.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to News from the Real World, where we talk about the top 10 comment-generating posts from the week. My name's Parker. I am a second year now stage production management grad student.
I'm Hannah. I am now a third year sound design grad student.
And I am Derek. Oh my God, it feels so good to say I'm a third year. We're so close. Oh my God, it's been 10 years. I'm a 10th year costume production grad.
And I didn't know we were doing this week, so I ran out of funny things to play. So
How sad.
here we go.
So our first article is so Live Nation's planning crowdless shows and drive-in concerts. This is on Rolling Stone by Ethan Millman. Basically, it is exactly that. It's a short little article kind of explaining how Live Nation is now starting to set up drive-in theater, drive-in concerts. They're starting to test that out over the summer, and they talked about their different marketplaces across the world. So like they have all of these different places are easing up restrictions in different ways, so they can start to test different crowdless concerts, and that takes several different forms. The article talks about like no audience at all, or a reduced house count, kind of like a checkerboard thing we talked about last week, and just talks about how the giant issue that they're facing. They had to reduce. They went into detail with a bunch of statistics, but basically they're reducing by several $1 million their budget. All of the executives are cutting their pay, which I thought was really cool, by at least 50%. All of the high-paying executives. So like they're combating it as best they can and setting up these alternative methods to get an income.
Okay, the only thing about like drive-in concerts is people are gonna drink.
Oh, you're so
like, that makes me so nervous. Like, unless you can, I don't know, breathalyze everyone on the way out, but that will probably, unfortunately fortunately deter people from coming. I don't know. It's complicated.
Right. That makes perfect sense. I didn't even think about that.
You have to set up some kind of like exit policy.
Yeah, because like drive-in movies, like they don't have the culture of drinking.
Right.
I mean, the movie theaters have tried in the last couple years, but
yeah, that's true.
But yeah, it was very, very straightforward article, kind of about the way that another aspect of the industry is moving forward and expecting to completely change the way that they do shows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What a shame if Ticketmaster goes under. What a shame.
With those fees. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's interesting. All of these, like everyone is putting so much energy and money into adaptation right now, and flexibility and like pivoting. Oh, why did I even say that? I shouldn't have even said that out loud. I hated myself as soon as I said that.
It's just as bad as when people keep saying unprecedented.
Yeah, exactly. So people are pivoting in this unprecedented moment, and
so we're pivoting.
I wonder if like by the time like they really lock down and like get these new forms of like development and content delivery really smooth, like we'll have a vaccine and contact tracing, and like people will be able to socialize again, but it could be a good lesson for alternatives of content.
Yeah.
Totally.
Though trying to get things started back up now before we have all those things is a rather bleak prospect, as one journalist writes, the post-COVID concert hall catastrophe. So this is written about 15 days ago, and the audience, Zach Finkelstein here, he takes the Boston Symphony Orchestra and the concert hall that their home is, and goes through and does like a social distanced seating plan, which has a person every 3 seats and only individuals in every other row, and talks about how many seats and what percentage of the main house would be able to be filled using this if the orchestra is all on stage, or if they have to remove the brass players and put them up in the balcony because they can't wear masks and play at the same time.
Oh my God.
And so like basically 13.5% of the balcony seats can be sold according to that plan. So they're talking about, tripling, quadrupling ticket prices just to barely make it. Because the subscriber base just won't be able to go and see all of the shows. So it's how do you survive, without having all those people to buy tickets inside? And I mean, it's not a very good bright, happy outlook on it.
It's kind of combating the checkerboard seating model, and that it's not cost effective.
Yeah, it's talking really about what challenges even that still faces. It's very sad.
Yeah. I mean, like, the first thing I think of is like, this is the moment when, like, socialism saves things, and the government being able to subsidize in some kind of way. But like, we live in a culture where we have to ask billionaires to save us instead. So it's weird. Sorry, that was really bleak.
Well, so speaking of our dumpster fire of a government currently, we can look to other countries to see how well they're doing, and places like South Korea are actually still holding shows. God damn.
It's all right. Classes just ended.
Yeah, I literally just turned in my last assignment last night, so.
Oh, fuck.
A mess.
No, that's it. Bye. I'm out. Goodbye.
Can I come back?
This actually directly relates as a potential solution, or what's being done to combat this, to the next article. The Broadway unions raise okay, let me share it.
Man, these articles, they're all just the same.
It's all the same.
The Broadway unions raise concerns on health insurance and the return of theater, written on BroadwayNews.com by Caitlin Houston on May 6th. So basically this talks about kind of a meeting of all of the major unions within the industry that you would think of, like IATSE, the stage directors and choreographers, IATSE, like the whole list. And they had a large meeting, of course, and they're talking about,
and the Broadway League also, right? The Producers League, yeah.
And they're talking about basically how can we give all of our members health insurance and continue to have that, even though they don't meet X number of weeks, which is a requirement in many of the industries. Like, you have to contribute this much to earn this tier of health insurance or whatnot. And what does that look like now, since people can't necessarily, there's not an ease of work in the pandemic. So a lot of the companies are just lobbying for more money. They've been granted quite a bit, but it's not enough to fully sustain. So they're lowering all of the requirements, but there's still requirements. I think one of the things mentioned was it's $1,500 you must make just to qualify to get insurance. You have to make that bare minimum of a dollar amount. And they are also, in the midst of all of this, calling on just more arts funding in general to help get through this as a whole, instead of just specifically the health insurance issue. So
It's
there's
almost
not
as
really
if
a solution.
health insurance shouldn't be tied to your employment.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
It's really an article describing kind of where they're at in the beginning stage and expecting it to get far more complicated and get much more challenging. But they're like, hey, we're trying really hard is kind of the article.
Yeah. Yeah. Personal anecdote. I'm a member of IATSE 489 here in Pittsburgh, and I've been on their health insurance for 5 years now because I've been lucky enough to have qualifying employment to have that much coverage. And the way that their system works is every single day that you work on a job, your employer contributes $86 to your like medical account. And it's a special account that the union's fund manages. And you can't use that money for anything except health insurance or health reimbursements. And you basically like pay your premiums from that account that your employer has been contributing to. And with the change of the quarter last month, I did not qualify for health insurance. And I was like, okay, school health insurance is a lot cheaper than buying on the marketplace or something or doing Cobra. And maybe I'll just be uninsured for the summer. And like the thought of that really terrified me because you can't, I wouldn't be able to start school health insurance until school actually started back again. But my union ended up voting that they will, if you can't cover the premium for the next quarter, they'll waive it. And if you were covered in the last quarter, they just automatically continued everyone's coverage for the rest of the summer. So it was like they, and they are in the position where they have enough in their fund for the entire union. I mean, IATSE is a very strong union in this country. Unfortunately, AEA is not a very strong union, and they have a lot more members who work a lot less and don't have that flexibility within their fund to just insure everyone because of a pandemic. And I felt really lucky that IATSE had enough of that flexibility.
Super good personal anecdote. It ties directly into this.
Yeah. And that's just my experience, like I'm sure lots of people are having lots of other experiences.
Now we can talk about Korea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I done moved and got too excited.
I was waiting for that.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Here we go. What can we learn from South Korea? Because our government's a mess. So this article, as of the end of the previous month, there are 3 shows still open in the arts district in Korea, South Korea. They are Dracula, a touring company is doing Phantom of the Opera, and I can't remember the other one. But basically, they have full seating, so it's like 96% or something of their house. They sell out everything. I imagine everyone's masked because that's more of the culture there, and they're doing a good job of washing their hands, and they have the ability that people get tested regularly, and when 2 members actually did test positive for COVID-19, they were able to quickly test the entire cast, the entire crew, and everyone who was there, like all of the 8,000 or something patrons who actually went and saw the show.
Wow.
It's amazing.
And that type,
very comprehensive.
I think you have to have that safety if you're going to operate a theater in a pandemic this way. Like you have to have that security, and that's how they're maintaining business and how they're doing it. And
if people feel safe, they will still come.
And outside of theater here, you can't get a test. Like, I mean, still, it's so challenging. I know it was much worse, but we don't have that.
You're not rich or work for the president, you can't get a test.
It's ridiculous.
I wonder, do they also do, is it in South Korea, do they have a practice of doing temperature scans before you enter any public building?
I bet they do.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'm sensing like in my personal life also, like we're entering this phase of like risk assessment, and we're no longer in this black and white, like social distancing, like absolutely no contact, blah, blah, blah. Like people are starting to assess risk in their lives and like how they can mitigate it in various ways, because everyone has a different risk assessment. And, I think like, that's a cool example of an entire government kind of approaching it from that point.
Yeah, with clear stated goals and plans of actions and
the means to support something that radical. Like that, if you're going to be that radical, there has to be like an equal means of support, I feel. And it sounds like they certainly are, the thought of going to a production in South Korea is more appealing than going to a production, to me personally, at a checkerboard seating pattern here over the summer.
Well put. Yeah.
Exactly.
Good luck getting there, but.
Right. Yeah. Like aside from every other issue with that.
Minor details.
So I guess moving on to our next article. The transitions are rough today, guys.
I tried, damn you.
Listen, Narelle won't mind. It's okay.
Narelle won't mind. I love it. So this article is really more of a summary article of the American Society of Theater Consultants' trip to Cuba. So titled Cuba Reflections on the Theater Consultants webpage. Basically, it just kind of talks about it took me a long time to realize this article wasn't COVID related, because everything we've been reading is like so COVID, and so this is what's happening. And they talk about these like community performances and everything. So I'm reading it, trying to figure out how it relates to COVID, and then finally realized that it was a 2019 trip. Like it was completely pre-COVID and everything. So that's where my brain is at. I'm like just so engulfed in all of this. I'm like, how does it relate to now? Like, what is happening?
Yeah.
But it was really cool to talk about how just various different aspects of theater in Cuba. Everything is managed by the government. So like actor pay, stage management pay, like everybody's hours, work, theater renovations, everything is managed by like a government ministry, or is what they called it. And I just think that's super cool. It's also 25 cents to get in, to compare it to the US dollar. So all of the ticket prices are incredibly small. It was an interesting article that just kind of talked about theater in Cuba. Anyone have any?
It was kind of neat how like accessible it was to everyone,
Yeah.
Even like the National Ballet and everything. Like, anyone can go and see it.
Because
they talked about, this essentially third world country that America, because of sanctions, is a shithole. They still have quote unquote socialized healthcare too. Everyone can get healthcare if they're sick.
And they talk about, because it's regulated pay, everyone's making equally small amounts of money, which is how it's so accessible. Which is, it makes you wonder how things would be different if that was the case here.
Yeah, it's like, is it better for them to have like guaranteed work that's kind of like subsidized in a way and less lucrative? Or is it better to have more competitive work that's not subsidized and like more lucrative for a fewer amount of people? Like, yeah.
Enough communist ramblings from the.
I know, it's like
from the real world.
There is zero segue into talking about how puppet theater can illuminate aspects of disability. This is called Puppetry and Disability Aesthetics. This was super cool. It's by Marina Saplina from HowlRound Theater Commons. So I learned a lot reading this article. It was awesome. It talks about the concept of disability essentialism, which is problematic in that it's the habit of like assuming that all disabilities share common experiences and that they are like the same, or that they feel the same, or that one person's disabled experience is akin in any way to another person's disabled experience. So the article talks about like trying to get rid of that through theatrical performance with puppetry, and specifically how like the material form of a puppet and the fact that it's made from scratch and that it's a choice. How the shape and form of that puppet is all a choice. And then also the kind of the aspect of movement and character that can be brought through when you, what do they call it? Not enact, but activate the puppet. They also talked about this group called Sins Invalid, which is a nonprofit that centers queer, non-binary, and trans, I'm reading my notes here, sorry, queer, non-binary, and trans people of color with disabilities. And they're foundational for pushing forward cultural organization within intersectional disability arts, practice, and the principles of disability justice. So just like a little plug for Sins Invalid, pretty cool organization there. But the thing that struck me the most about this article was an example that they gave about a puppet show, like a 5 or 10 minute puppet show that featured a puppet form that had like a deformed, bulging body. And then by the end of the play, the body had taken a kind of like more normalized shape. And the transition of the physical form of the puppet was a metaphor within the play of spiritual poison and like spiritual purification, which was like really problematic because you're using like a, you know, an atypical body form to symbolize like growth or improvement in some kind of way, like turning into a more typical form. And the article just talks about like being more responsible with puppetry. I thought it was really awesome.
I see how that can be problematic.
Yeah, and how like if you like you should feature disabled puppets, and they shouldn't just be in wheelchairs. Yeah,
I think that's so fascinating. Like that statement about like, you know, not every disability is in the same. You know, if you were how different, you know, your experience is if you were born without a leg or it, you know, had to be amputated because of your time in a combat zone, or there was some kind of accident or disease, or, you know, how different that makes. And it's like I had to take a moment to stop and rethink and like, yeah, I kind of held that assumption too, that, you know,
yeah,
disability is a disability, but it's really not.
yeah. This article actually, it challenged a lot of my bias. I got to be honest, and I love when pieces can do that. So I really enjoyed reading it. Yeah. And how aesthetically, like those two people in that example that you say, Hannah, like they appear to have similar experiences because they look the same. But
you know. Exactly. Oh God, no, I can't say that. Sorry. Let's go on to the next article.
Moving on.
I'm sorry.
I don't know what that
was
was.
say something really, really not okay as a transition.
Well, great. Your nails look great, though.
Thank you. Moving on, the article's about horror movie monster makeup. It's basically an interview with some special effects artists who work primarily on horror films. If you could bring up the article here.
I'm like, yeah, tell me more.
Engrossed, fully engrossed.
So it's written by Jazz Tenge. He interviews 3 different special effects artists. One of them who I've heard some unfortunate last names, like Butts or Swallows, but Eric Porn takes the cake here.
Yeah. Wow. Sounds like a challenge.
But the main thing is like they're talking about how even with modern technology and the push towards CGI, the aesthetic of, you know, real special effects and latex and makeup and actually having actors you know, be able to interact, so it's not just they're in a sound stage with the black suit and the white dots everywhere, doing motion capture. is still alive and present, because like all of these filmmakers who grew up in the 70s, 80s, 90s still want to hold on to that because it holds and it stands the test of time still. There's some early CGI films from like the early 2000s and they don't look too good anymore.
Arguably, I mean, horror as a genre really lends itself to that type of work more so than like a Marvel Universe movie, or it's a weird comparison, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like part of the nature of horror movie is how real it could be, in an aspect there. And I personally feel like hand done makeup in that kind of craft is so much more realistic and believable in a way that
finessed. Yeah.
Finessed, exactly. Totally. Anyway.
Just thoughts and ramblings from people who have no idea about makeup.
I wish I knew more. I took a class. It's so much appreciation for the people who have those skills.
Yeah. Next.
What's the next article? I don't remember.
Are you gonna say it? Am I going to bring it up?
Yes.
Is this one?
So it's called Gamer Actor Tasi Alabastro Helps Theaters Use Twitch. It's by Lily Janiak from Datebook. Yeah, the title totally explains it. This actor also has a strong Twitch presence, and he hosts hangouts and kind of like game nights and does like trivia and stuff, but he does it like as filling the role of a host from his Twitch broadcast. So he's kind of like entertaining through the process. But it talks about how theaters have been hitting him up to kind of help them transition content to online platforms like Twitch, because what is he says in the article, there's an immediacy and interactivity lacking in other online services like Facebook and YouTube and Instagram and Zoom. And with Twitch, alongside the streaming window, there's a chat sidebar, and he says, it's expected, a convention of the form, that whoever is performing or broadcasting will respond constantly to what viewers write. So it's kind of like this, there's like a little mini culture, there's a micro culture within Twitch that's like it's more interactive. It's less like I am performing for you and you can comment if you want, or like the commenters can talk to themselves. But this is specifically like I'm supposed to be reading and interacting with everything that you're saying, which is super useful for theater. And I thought it was interesting that like most of the examples of theaters bringing content onto Twitch were about like theaters doing interviews with their actors, or it wasn't necessarily like putting a play on Twitch. It was like different ways that theaters, as we've seen, are engaging with their audiences that aren't necessarily about putting scripted works up. Yeah.
I like using that platform that Twitch offers, because from small streamers to even the biggest streamers, that kind of community and interactivity you can get not only with the host and the person actually streaming, but the kind of sub community that develops around them as well.
Mm-hmm.
He even talked in that article, when he does stream, there's, you think he has 50 or so regulars that he knows, and like will ask them about how their families are doing, and that kind of, closeness and togetherness, I think is kind of unique.
Totally. I think there are probably a ton of programs and platforms that are not typically used for theater that are going to be explored in the next couple of months. I mean, as we're working on online productions and what that looks like and planning further ahead, whatever that kind of develops into, I think a lot of things are going to be explored. And I read this and I was like, Twitch seems like the perfect platform to experiment in, with the way it's set up and performative nature of everything. And it's just and it's newer, it's different. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm like. No, go ahead, Hannah.
I was gonna say that's a Raven. They did the socially distant rave a couple months ago.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Will and Talbot. That was actually really cool and well done.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm like a nerd. I'm just like a dweeb, but like okay, so I'll give a few examples. Like I watch a few Facebook Live drag shows, that local drag queen Schwa de Vive does. And
I love Schwa. Okay.
He's great, yeah. But he's like very interactive with his audience, and he's like, hey, he does karaoke request live, right? Type in a karaoke song and we'll try to find it on YouTube, and I'll pretend that I know it and I'll sing for you. And it's like, how are y'all feeling today? Write it in the comments. And like, when I write something and he says hi Derek to me on live Facebook, like, I know it's nothing special, but I get like a little bit like of a giddy excitement. It's like, which is kind of, I think it's actually desperate and sad is what it is. It's because I'm like, oh my God, an interaction, a spontaneous interaction, like, and I get kind of giddy and excited. Or like when I listen to DJs play on Twitch, which has happened a lot lately, a lot of EDM stuff, which like I can get into sometimes, like even chatting with other people like in Pittsburgh who are listening to this Pittsburgh DJ on Twitch is like, oh my God, I know you. And like, you're sitting on your porch in Friendship and you just invited me over. Like, there's something really comforting about it, even though it's like really digital, really not personal at all.
I think that those like small interactions online have become so much more important since we're all locked down on our own. Like and I feel like we're allowed to value those because everyone's always like talking about and there are, downsides to social media and everything, but now is the time to like embrace it, I think. I think that's such a cool story, Derek.
So desperate.
So not.
Sometimes the thirst is helpful.
Yeah.
Well, moving on to a slightly different topic. Why is there no stunt Oscar yet? Talked about by some of the directors in the action industry, but specifically the director from the John Wick franchise.
This is such a good point.
It really is, and I love the John Wick movies. I've seen them all, and I think it's really cool. I don't remember if the article actually mentions this or not, but the director of all of those movies was Keanu Reeves' stunt double in the Matrix. I don't know if it was the Matrix movies, but he worked with Keanu Reeves as a stunt double, and his primary background is in stunt work. So that's kind of where he's coming at things from a directorial standpoint, and really these long action sequences that show the intricacy of what these brilliant stage combat and these stunts and the brilliance of all of it, like a dance. I'm so not being articulate right now.
You're good.
But yeah, it's a really cool article that talks about why there isn't a category there in the Oscar, and a big part of the conversation is who would accept it, because it's so easy to delineate a head of a department and like the head of the makeup department or the head of this, and there's not really one central person to take the credit for the stunts. So it's hard to give, like it's almost like they want to give an award, but they're still working out kind of the details on how that would work. They also mentioned how some of the stuntmen are in the Academy and have been moving out to more prevalent positions within the Academy, and the Academy really wants to see this award. So I certainly think it's something that will happen very, very soon.
That it's so interesting because like, how do you measure the stunt person? Like, if they're in a film that doesn't have that many stunts, or how much is it relying on fight choreographers and all those kind of directorial things versus actually the stunt individuals.
Yeah, and it's also like if you're doing stunts well, you don't notice them. So it's like the point of the entire practice is to not be seen, to conceal in a way. So like, I think it's interesting, like that makes it even more important to recognize it, because their work goes so unrecognized, because that means they're doing their job well. But I liken it to a lot of the conversations that have been happening in New York about doing a Best Ensemble Award for the Tony Awards, because a lot of the new shows are really ensemble pieces that have featured actor moments, but like they really function as group ensemble works. So people want to be recognized more for that, which I think is really cool.
A stunt Oscar would have to almost be like the entire team.
Oh yeah,
winning the award, because it's like,
yeah,
you can pick out one specific like stunt that they do, but all the people that have to be there to support that.
Yeah, and like, how do you, like, would you have to look kind of backstage in a way, like behind the scenes, to look at this quality of the stunt work and the ingenuity of it or the imagination of it? Or can you look at it just on its face in the actual piece itself?
The rubric here, like,
It's like trying to give stage managers a Tony. How do you judge them?
Yeah, good point. Yeah, exactly. And they absolutely should. Don't you think, Parker?
I've certainly had that thought, but I immediately counter it with like, how would you know what would be the, like, it's similar, oddly similar to what we're talking about with combat. I mean, yes, as a stage manager, I would certainly love to see a stage management award at the Tonys, but I also see how it's probably got to be thought out quite a bit more. I mean,
yeah, and that it's.
Do you listen to the stage manager call a show and base it on that? Do you
right.
What if a problem happened, and then like that
but also
handled an issue well, but they happened to go to a performance that there were no issues at, so they didn't get to see that. Like, it's so. I feel like it's hard to judge, and it would be really hard to.
But it deserves recognition, right?
It does.
Also, like, their job is calling the shows just a small part of your job. Like, you are responsible for the creative maintenance of the show, and like it's a managerial position that uses a ton of creative skills. Like, when you are the PSM and the associate director is no longer checking in on the show, you are directing the show. Like,
yeah, and I think because in a lot of ways the PSM wears so many hats. Like, they're a director one day and then they're this the next day, and and every show is so just wildly different. It's hard to nail down what specifically the stage manager did to affect the show, I think. Like, it's like you're generally there and you're generally helping every single day, but there's no, like, it's almost hard to do like a specific attainable thing to judge off of. I don't know why I'm arguing against it. I would love for this to happen.
No, I think they're valid. They're valid obstacles to like assessment. Yeah.
Very cool stuff to think about.
Let's make this happen. Hey,
a popularity contest of
in our lifetime.
Throw the most money around.
Yeah, Carnegie Mellon University, you basically run the Tony Awards now, so let's get on this. David, listen to me, David. Send the message up. They do, though. They kind of do. Okay, anyway.
Last article, Derek.
Last article. A theater project explores collective solutions to saving the ocean by Kira Irwin. This is on the Theater Times. So this is in South Africa. I'm going to butcher pronunciations right now. But the theater project that they're talking about is called the Lalela Luando, and it translates to Listen to the Sea. It's a research-based theater project. So I'm looking at my notes here. A group went around to locals, people of the community, and also environmentalists, conservationists, and companies, businesses who use or work in and around the ocean, and solicited all of their opinions and feedback and thoughts. And they asked them this really kind of inspiring, in the truest sense, question: what is your first memory of the ocean? Which kind of like brings a very authentic response out of people. And then they turned all of those responses and all of that input into a theater piece that's kind of like a socially conscious theater piece, which is super cool. I love this. It reminds me of like, Augusta Boal kind of theater, like, theater of the people for the people. And it was super empowering for the community. There was a really interesting thing about how there's a conflict between environmental justice advocates and environmental conservation advocates in South Africa. And, it's hard striking a balance between like, how do you use the ocean for a community's benefit? and where's the line of abusing the ocean for whoever's benefit. They were called Empatheater was the collective that, which I think is a cool name for a theater company. So apparently the play was on the Natal coastline in 2019, and it offers some useful ideas for an expansion. I don't know why I wrote that, to be honest. I have no idea. Ramble.
I like that, using theater as a means for change.
Yeah. And I think it's so important to have that element of like positivity and to be reminded of the power of like what theater can do in person, and how we're not with that right now in a lot of ways, and just to see that, it is so refreshing and just great to hear a story like that.
What a happy, uplifting note to end on.
Yay!
Remember the power of theater, kids.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. Maybe we'll see you next week. Maybe we'll see you next semester. It's a mystery.
Maybe this is the last. Maybe it's not.
No, we won't see you next week. We're done here. We're done. Enough is enough.
Audio unavailable.
We need breaks. God damn it.
You still have me. Forget Sebastian.
True.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.